Welcome to the Girls Marketing Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things marketing and the perfect backing track to your workday. Every week, we get up close and personal with marketers revolutionising the industry so you can learn from the best in the game. From the latest marketing trends to building a successful marketing career, no topic is off limits. At Girls in Marketing, we champion progress, inspire change, and encourage women to take the marketing world by storm. Check out our website and membership to learn more and get involved, as we'd love to welcome you to our inner circle. Right, let's dive into another episode together. Hello and welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. Today we're going to be talking all about marketing to Gen Z. Now, before we start, I want to ask everyone, because I feel like we've all just had a bit of an existential crisis around this, but what generation are we all?
Okay, I'm Gen Z, but I think I could be Millennial. They changed it today. I just don't understand. They seem to pop up new ones constantly.
Yeah.
But Gen Z, let's go with that.
I'm Gen Z, 2002. So, yeah.
Make me feel
I'm
so old.
young and cool. So not young and cool.
I'm very much a millennial.
Yeah.
Millennial and proud. I feel like there are elements of Gen Z that I do relate to, particularly working in marketing and kind of like the always on phone technology, that kind of element of things. But yeah, I'm very much a millennial. There's not a lot of debate around that.
Well, I'm also Gen Z, but likewise to you, Becky, I feel like there's this, we did a social post on it recently, there's this kind of like mini, not official generation, which is like Zillennial. So it's people who were kind of born in like the 90s, like later 90s sort of thing. And they're people who relate, as you said, Amy, to that kind of Gen Z in a way, and also to millennial in a way, because there's things that like, you know, you'll talk about as a millennial that I'm like, never heard of that before. But then there's also stuff that, for example, my sister who is like, you know, 11 will talk about, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, and I know that. So I feel like I very much identify as Zillennial, and I know we've spoken about this before.
I think Zillennial are them people who like remember bits from both. So like the social post that we did was like them people who remember like Clueless, but also the Kissing Booth.
Yeah.
And like stuff like that. So like Phineas and Ferb, and who else was it? The cartoon.
I can't remember.
It was a cartoon from
I don't know the Kissing Booth.
You don't know
You
the
don't
Kissing
know the
Booth?
Kissing
I don't know the kissing booth.
I
I've
don't
never
think
heard
so.
that in my life. I know Clueless.
You're showing your age, guys.
Oh no. Yeah, no, Phineas and Ferb though. Phineas and Ferb is like Gen Z,
The one
and
I could
I
still
feel like
sing the soundtrack to you, I think.
Yeah.
Not gonna.
Was it Hey Arnold?
Oh
Yes,
yeah, hey
yeah.
Arnold. Love
Arthur.
I don't know what that
Arthur's
is.
the OG.
Love that.
Yeah, see, I don't
I
know
don't
what
really know
that
Phineas
is.
and Ferb. That does nothing.
Phineas and Ferb was so good.
It was sick.
it was.
It was
Anyway.
so good.
Yeah, it was really good.
Walk
Anyway,
down memory lane.
do you have that burning desire to create a website for a new idea but don't have any coding experience? Don't worry, I've got you. Hostinger is a sponsor of today's episode, and they have created an AI website builder tool allowing anyone who wants to take their idea online to do so with zero coding skills. Just write 3 sentences to sum up what you're looking for, and Hostinger does the rest. The AI even offers personalized suggestions on layout, design, and content. Bring your new idea to life by heading to hostinger.com/girlsinmarketing and use the exclusive code girlsinmarketing for 10% off your plan. What's stopping you? But talking about marketing to Gen Z, so Gen Z are digital natives. So for anyone who's listening, wants a bit of a definition, Gen Z are the people who are kind of, well, officially, what year is the start date? Is it 97? The start date officially?
98.
98, and then all the way up to like 2010 or 13 or something. So that's kind of like the age demographic. It's people that grew up, have always had a phone, have always had some sort of like, most likely a smartphone, you know, because the iPhone came around. When was the iPhone? I can't even remember. This is very good.
No, I had
It's
an
like
LG
2000
cookie, so
Yeah. Oh
pink LG cookie and a BlackBerry.
Was that your first phone?
An LG cookie.
I had
yeah,
a BlackBerry.
See, my first phone was a literal Nokia brick with Snake on
With
it.
Snake. I was going to ask about Snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gen Z are them people who like had pretty much a lot of the childhood without a phone, which was like up until like teenage years, and then teenage years is obviously when like the phones came into like iPhones and like Blackberries and like all that kind of stuff, and like BBM. Do you remember BBM?
Yeah.
I think it depends as well what you define as a phone, because when I first had a phone, my phone was just a phone. Whereas now a phone, how many Gen Z actually use their phone to phone people. Like it's probably the least used function of a phone for Gen Z now, isn't it really? So I always kind of think that like when I had a phone, it was purely to like ring my mum when I got home from school and be like, I'm home. And that was it. Didn't do anything else. But now people would message or chat or whatever it is that they do. Yeah, FaceTime, like social media, whatever it is, rather than actually like call someone or pick up the phone to them. So I think it's the definition of a phone's definitely changed.
And I think in terms of like marketing to Gen Z, how do you guys see that as different? Because I think there's this whole like divide of like how you market to Gen Z should be like completely different, and like you should talk to them with like all these cool words and like slang and stuff. And it's like, no, like they're not people who just reiterate slang all day. It's literally just like a new way of like entertaining. And I think the brands that see it as like a massive divide between like Gen Z and like boomers and like all these different generations, I think they're the brands that get it wrong, because at the end of the day, these people are just people. And like even with TikTok, you see like loads of brands who are like, oh, we want to target Gen Z, we'll just go to TikTok. But like Gen Z are on multiple social media platforms. Like I read a stat the other day. In fact, no, I didn't. I listened to it on Grace Beverley's podcast. And it was like, I think she said it was 9 people have 9 different social media accounts, which obviously on different social media platform on average, which is interesting. That just shows like people are like Gen Z are on different, like are on LinkedIn, are on TikTok, are on Instagram. They on all them platforms, but like the way that you talk to them on different platforms will be different. So yeah, I don't think like marketing to Gen Z is always that like we've got to speak cool and we've got to use cool things and be so cool. Like it's not like that.
Interesting that you say that, because I read something the other day that Snapchat is on the rise again. For me, I can't say I've used Snapchat in a long time.
No, me neither.
But apparently this year in 2024, it's going to be the most popular with Gen Z. And I think we forget about it a lot as marketers. I don't engage with it, so I don't know too many brands that do, to my knowledge. But I think because of the short form side of it, you can make it exclusive, like repurpose your TikTok content. You can post videos and stuff like on there, just like you can Instagram and Facebook Reels and stuff like that. But I thought that was really interesting, because I had not thought about Snapchats or Snap Streaks or anything in like a hot minute.
Oh my God, do you remember Snap Streaks?
Yeah.
I
feel like you'd love a Snap Streak.
I loved a Snap Streak back in the day.
No, you still use Snapchat, I'm sure. See, so Kira's still on Snapchat. I haven't used Snapchat for a million years.
Yeah. But
that's so embarrassing though.
It's weird though, because I think Snapchat, again, because they are on the rise, they're like they're bringing out new features, and like it is quite cool, because I know I mentioned my sister before, but she's on Snapchat, and when I see her face, I was like, what's he doing? Like, what even? And she was like, oh no, it's really good. And she like used it to like like Snapchat video, like her friends and like all of that sort of thing. But it's interesting because I also don't know many brands that are utilising Snapchat, which is interesting, because if you are a Gen Z brand, it might be worth investing in it.
I think the best way that brands are using Snapchat right now, and I can see this going like forward as a Snapchat user, I see a lot of like brands just using like influencer marketing, and that's their way into Snapchat. Yeah. So like obviously you can like subscribe to stories, I think it's called now, and like KSI, like GK Barry, like all them kind of people use Snapchat to have that, like, because obviously it's got that expire feature of the 24 hours, and I also feel like Snapchat feels a bit more exclusive than Instagram. I feel like you do get that step closer to like closeness with these influencers, so like that's how brands are getting on Snapchat by influencer marketing ads, like through that. But saying that, I feel like Snapchat as a whole is such a different app, and the way that you go on there, like for example, I would go on there just to message people. Like it's not like a broadcast, or like
you wouldn't go on there to like consume content like you go on TikTok.
Like I wouldn't go on there to look through everyone's stories. Like it's more like you go on there to answer a message or something. That's how I would use it anyway. But yeah, it is an interesting thing, and I do think, like you said, it's definitely going to be on the rise, because Snapchat were the first people who brought out stories. Instagram obviously got that off Snapchat, and TikTok have obviously copied that off Instagram. So I think Snapchat have really been good in like the app development and user development. It's just keeping up with the younger guys, I guess.
Yeah. I think another thing for me that I think is really kind of prevalent amongst Gen Z is kind of their interest in other elements of what a brand has to offer other than just product and price. And I think that's a huge shift from what things were like previously. I mean, as a millennial, when I was younger, a lot of the time, the only kind of times you would see brands or you'd see their products advertised would be on like ad breaks when you were watching TV, because everybody watched just regular TV that you couldn't fast forward, you couldn't record, you couldn't watch Netflix on demand. You watched what was on the telly there and then. So you had such a huge captive audience, and you could fairly easily, I guess, kind of target certain demographics depending on what kind of TV shows you're advertising around. You'd sort of know who the audience would be, and brands could do that quite effectively. But other than kind of seeing what their products were, watching the advert, was it entertaining, and then kind of going on to see like, was that price point right for me? That was all that I really, or most people generally really cared about. But nowadays, because people, you know, Gen Z consume content in so many different ways, can see so many different aspects of a business, can understand so much more about them, about like their values, what they stand for, are they funny, how they interact with their consumers. Like that two-way kind of conversation never really existed before. It does now with the rise of social media, and Gen Z just kind of care a lot more about that now. Like, for example, I don't know, a brand like IKEA or something when I was younger was like, it was just an affordable furniture shop that you would go to buy your bunk beds and your sofa and your lamps or whatever. But IKEA now, and their marketing strategy, not necessarily has just shifted just for Gen Z, because obviously it appeals to wider audiences. But, you know, they're so much more conscious of kind of like what their message is as a brand, how ethical they are, the causes they stand for, how they communicate, how they use their different social platforms, using like humour. We see that a lot through IKEA, and I think they do that really well, and utilising the kind of the different platforms and targeting Gen Z in that sense. So I think that Gen Z just kind of care a lot more about kind of all of what comes with a brand, rather than just kind of the fundamental things that used to be most important.
I mean, Gen Z make up 32% of the population.
Really?
Which is more, it's a larger cohort than millennials and boomers.
Is it?
Yeah. So it's, I don't know where I got that stat from, by the way, guys, but I did find that stat. Fact check. I did actually find that stat. 32% of the population, which is interesting, because you think, oh, well, it, you know, don't really matter, or as a brand, if you're doing marketing, actually, like that's a huge proportion of the population that if you're not marketing to, or you're not really utilising the channels that they utilise, that you're quite missing out, because, you know, what we've talked about with Snapchat and TikTok, like Gen Z are digital natives. Like they really understand technology, and even to the point where they consume content in a way that like they just understand. Like, you know, even when you speak to younger people, I think it's crazy how they interact with content now, but that is gonna just continue to change and continue to evolve, because that generation is, I mean, one, huge, but also like they're digitally native. So they're ones that have always been, they're so tech savvy that they know, you know, brands that aren't, you know, brands that are still putting links in their Instagram posts and all of that sort of thing. Gen Z know that, and it kind of gives them the ick.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to remember that you're not just targeting Gen Z through those channels, in the sense that like Gen Z can be huge influences to other people. Yeah. So for example, like their parents, they have a huge influence on them and kind of the brands that they buy from and the products that they use. So even if your target audience isn't necessarily Gen Z, doesn't mean that you can't think of them as somebody or a generation that you would want to influence or get on side. Because if you know what you're saying, Liv, they're a huge percentage of the population. Kind of by knock-on effect, they can influence other demographics as well. You know, they can have an influence on who their parents shop with, or the products that their parents use, or other family members and things. And I think also as a result of Gen Z becoming more and more kind of online, other generations are doing the same. So, you know, millennials or boomers or whoever, they're having children who are then online. And as a result, those generations are becoming more tech savvy and understanding it more because they have to. So I think it's kind of driving the whole of our society to be more online. I don't think you can really consider millennials or boomers to be kind of like the non-tech generations anymore, because I do think that whether they want to or not, they are also becoming more online and tech savvy. So I think that we've got to consider not just marketing to Gen Z for themselves, but also for everyone they're bringing with them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I didn't even think about that, but that's so true because if, for example, you've got a brand who are maybe like on TikTok and someone who's Gen Z and then they go to the shop with like their mom or something and they're like, oh, I've seen this brand on TikTok. I definitely know that like that would sway parents to buy things
100%.
or even if, as we said, they're not the customer, they're just like, they've seen the brand or something like that. Even like brands that are doing huge things with like mascots or like humorous content on different platforms. It's like, oh, I've seen this, you know, Duolingo or like, you know, Ryanair and all that sort of thing. Obviously, you know, a young child isn't necessarily going to buy tickets to Paris on, you know, with Ryanair, but their parents will. And if they mention like, oh, have you checked Ryanair sort of thing, like that's so interesting. I didn't think about that.
I mean, I'm not Gen Z, I'm a millennial, but like I know, like if nobody else, my mum thinks I'm cool. So my opinion to her would matter. So if I've consumed content that's aimed at millennials or Gen Z or whoever, I will have a knock-on effect on her and the decisions that she makes. So I do think it's definitely something to consider.
Well, it's like, for example, me and my sister started using Estrid, like the razor subscription service, which kind of encourages people to do whatever they want with their body hair and stuff like that. We both started using it, got our nice, like, you know, pastel coloured razors in the post, and my mum jumped straight on it. She loves it. And I think it's just that, I don't know, she just feels a bit cool, feels like it's just relatable. And I think as well, one thing I enjoy as a Gen Z is like that conversational, friendly, relaxed type of tone that a lot of brands have taken on board now. So you've got Oatly, I think Monzo is a really good example for younger people. Monzo's just so much less intimidating than the likes of other big traditional banks because they're straightforward and they explain things and it's educational. So I think that conversational tone is really good. And we see that a lot on TikTok and other things like that. And that's why people like them interpersonal, kind of more authentic, I suppose, relationships with brands.
I think it's because a lot of the time older people are happy to learn from younger people.
Yeah.
Obviously there's sometimes they're not, but generally they are. So, you know, if there are young people who are saying, oh, actually, like I've just found this subscription service or I've just seen this app or anything like that, you know, I say stuff like this to my nan all the time. I'm like, oh, have you seen this or have you seen that? And I bought her one of these, you know, one of them chopper things off that's been went on viral on TikTok. She's like, it changed my life. I love it. And it's kind of, it's crazy because I've obviously had that impact on her because I've seen it. I bought one for myself, loved it, bought one for her. And I know that even if I hadn't bought it, she would have bought it for herself. So again, it's that knock-on effect. And like, I absolutely love that your mum's using Estrid.
Well, we always influence each other though. I think even in the office, like you started using Free Soul Greens. I've jumped onto the Free Soul Green brands, Tala, great, all stuff like that. Like I feel like we all influence each other nowadays.
Hiring my first team member was both exciting and daunting. It marked a shift from being a solo entrepreneur to an employer. And with that shift came new responsibilities, especially understanding the importance of employers' liability insurance. So, what exactly is employers' liability insurance? In simple terms, it's a legal requirement for UK businesses that have employees. This insurance protects your business if an employee gets injured or becomes ill because of the work they do for you. When I hired my first team member, I knew I was responsible for their well-being at work, and that's a big responsibility. Employers' liability insurance was not just a legal necessity, it became my peace of mind, ensuring that my team and my business were protected. Kingsbridge Insurance is a sponsor of today's episode, and they understand the unique challenges that we face when businesses grow. The employer's liability insurance is specifically designed for small businesses and startups. If you're at that exciting stage of hiring your first employee or planning to expand your team, I encourage you to learn more about employer's liability insurance. You can find out more about the packages Kingsbridge offer by visiting their website, kingsbridge.co.uk. Now, let's dive back into the episode.
And I think in terms of like marketing to Gen Z, like one of the main things, especially in like 2024 and like as like personalization gets more important and like we can get access to more data about customers, about audiences, I think hyper-personalization is super important because Gen Z just want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be valued. So that hyper-personalization and not using the same broadcast messaging to all of your audience, making sure you understand segments of your audience and then playing to them segments, especially like on email. And I know Beth spoke about it within her podcast episode for email. I think it's just so important. And like Gen Z, more than any like other generation, know the value of that and like are really pushing for that, because then you feel valued by a brand and you feel like you're understood. So I think they're definitely the generation that are driving that forward, and the more personalization you can get with like customers, as long as it's obviously not creepy or like it's relevant, then it's super important. And that just comes with collecting data, and as much as data as possible you can get about your customer.
And
So
even think about
important.
how much we all look forward to like our Spotify Wrapped. I feel like
Yeah.
that is such a good example, and they release new features every year. So I think last year was you could figure out which artist you were listening to the most per month. So for example, last year I went to see the 1975 in January, so I was listening to the 1975 all the time. And I think Spotify is just exciting because you do feel like you kind of getting your money's worth, but you're also excited to look back and reflect. And I think that's why like UGC and short form content's dead popular as well, because a lot of people do like to go back and look at their videos. I mean, I do go back and look at mine, I can't lie. So I just think, yeah, hyper-personalization is the best, the one.
Yeah. Especially when they've got such a stance on issues as well. Like even, when we think about different brands, Gen Z as well, I think when you think about brands, they're like, oh, well, we don't really care about Gen Z because, it doesn't matter. Like, they're not our customer. But actually, Gen Z are your customers of the future. Like, you need to think about that. So talking to them now, it's like almost a long-term strategy. I know that sounds somewhat like cynical, but genuinely, they're not necessarily going to buy your product or your service now, but they may in future. Obviously, they may impact other people or talk to other people about your brand, but equally, they will be in future. So they'll remember things that you do. So if you start now with the personalization, really thinking about like the social, political issues that Gen Z are really, focused on, they'll remember that in future and they'll take that with them. There's so much happening that actually it's about brands leaning into that rather than shying away from it, because I think so many brands just get a bit scared of, oh, it's like digital and it's technology and we don't really want to do that. But actually, like, you're going to have to move with the times, because that's what, it's the future, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's a wrap on another team episode. Before you forget, we'd love to make this a two-way conversation. Feel free to share your opinions on this episode with us on social media by tagging Girls in Marketing. If you did enjoy listening to our team chat about marketing, please follow and leave a review of the podcast so we can continue to grow and share more episodes like this one. Your support really does go a long way. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode, but until then, join in the conversation on social media. See you next week.